People ask me all the time, Charlie, what is the secret to making money while you sleep? And I tell them there is no secret. There is only sanity repeated until it becomes wealth, but nobody wants to hear that because sanity is boring and boredom doesn't sell. The modern investor has been infected with a peculiar delusion. They think passive income means downloading an app, clicking a few buttons, and watching money appear. What they are really looking for is magic. And magic has never existed in the history of capitalism, no matter how many YouTube gurus promise otherwise. I've been alive long enough to watch the same stupidity dress itself in new clothes every decade. In the 1920s, it was Florida swampland. In the 1990s, it was .com fairy tales. Today, it is side hustles, NFTs, and automated dropshipping empires, different costumes, same circus, and same fools paying admission. Let me be brutally clear about something. If someone is selling you a passive income system, they are making their income from you, not from the system. The real passive income earners are too busy compounding to bother teaching courses about it. Here is what actually works. And it is so simple, it will disappoint you. You take money you don't need immediately, you buy ownership in businesses that produce things people actually want, and then you sit there like a stone Buddha while time does the work. That is the whole game. But the average person can't do this. Not because they are stupid, but because they are human. And humans are wired for action, for novelty, and for the illusion of control. Sitting still feels like surrender. So they tinker, trade, optimize, and slowly destroy the only advantage they ever had, which is time. I will tell you what passive income really is. It is the dividend check that arrives whether you are awake or asleep, sick or healthy, smart that day or stupid. It is the rent payment from a tenant in a building you bought 30 years ago. It is the royalty from a patent that outlived its inventor. These things have one quality in common. They don't require your daily participation. The irony is that building true passive income requires enormous activity up front. You have to earn money, which isn't passive. You have to learn to spend less than you earn, which requires constant discipline. You have to study businesses until you can separate the durable from the temporary. And then, here is the hardest part. You have to do nothing for decades while everyone around you is doing something. When Warren and I started Berkshire, we weren't looking for 100 ways to make money. We were looking for 1 or 2 ways that actually made sense. Quality over quantity, concentration over diversification, and patience over cleverness. Take insurance, for example. Most people think it is boring. They are right. It is boring. But boring industries run by competent people produce rivers of cash year after year, and that cash, when reinvested into more boring businesses, compounds into something that looks like genius, but is really just arithmetic. The problem with modern investing advice is that it is designed to keep you busy. Busy people trade more, traders pay more fees. Fees make advisors rich and clients poor. It is a wealth transfer system masquerading as wealth creation. I remember in the early days, someone asked me how often they should check their portfolio. I said, how often do you check to see if your house is still standing? The question confused them. That is because they thought of stocks as prices, not properties. Once you understand you own a piece of a business, the daily price becomes irrelevant noise. True passive income is what happens when you stop confusing price with value. The price of Coca-Cola stock bounces around like a drunk at a bar, but the value, the actual business of selling sugar water to billions of people, just keeps grinding forward regardless of market mood. Own the business, ignore the price, collect the dividends, and repeat for 50 years. Most investors think they are too sophisticated for this approach. They want multi-factor models, algorithmic strategies, and exotic derivatives. What they really want is to feel smart, but the market doesn't pay you for feeling smart. It pays you for being right, and being right usually looks embarrassingly simple. Here's a test I give people. If you can't explain your investment strategy to a 12-year-old in 2 minutes, you don't have a strategy. You have confusion wrapped in jargon. The best ideas are always simple. We buy good businesses at reasonable prices and hold them forever. A child could understand that, but adults somehow can't execute it. The reason is emotional, not intellectual. People need activity to feel productive. An investor who does nothing for 5 years feels like they are failing, even if their net worth double. Meanwhile, the trader who made 100 moves feels accomplished even though they are poorer after fees and taxes. There is a reason Buffett and I made most of our money from a handful of decisions. Not because we didn't have other ideas, but because we had the discipline to wait for the obvious ones. We passed on thousands of opportunities to avoid making stupid mistakes. That is not laziness. That is wisdom. I've seen brilliant people destroy themselves because they couldn't tolerate simplicity. They needed complications to match their self-image. They built elaborate tax shelters, chased private equity deals, and invested in their cousin's startup. And 20 years later, the guy who just bought an index fund and forgot about it had more wealth and less stress. That is the dirty secret about passive income. The passive part isn't about the money. It is about your ego. You have to be passive enough to let reality work without interference. Most people can't do it. Their ego demands participation. Let me tell you about a conversation I had in 1990. A young investor asked me why I wasn't buying internet stocks. He said the world is changing. Don't you want to be part of it? I told him I did want to be part of it. As a customer, not an investor, I didn't understand how these companies would make money, so I didn't invest. He laughed at me and called me old-fashioned. 2 years later, he was broke, and I was still holding the same boring stocks I'd owned for decades, still collecting dividends and still compounding. The world did change, but human nature didn't. That is what people miss about passive income. It is not about predicting change. It is about owning what survives change. Businesses that sold soap, food, insurance, and electricity in 1950 are still doing it today. Sure, the technology changed, but the business model didn't. If you want real passive income, stop chasing innovation and start owning consistency. The innovative companies might make someone rich, probably the founders. But the consistent companies make their shareholders rich slowly, reliably, and boringly. The best passive income investments are probably in industries you find dull. If it excites you, it is probably exciting everyone else too. And when everyone is excited, prices reflect optimism, not value. You want the opposite. You want pessimism on a good business. Warren used to say he would rather buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price. That is because wonderful companies keep compounding even if you overpay slightly. Fair companies just sit there requiring constant attention. The average investor spends their life buying fair companies at wonderful prices thinking they are being clever. Then they watch those companies stay mediocre for decades, while the wonderful companies they passed on compound into fortunes. Here is the mental shift that changes everything. Stop thinking about making money and start thinking about owning money, making machines. A dividend stock isn't a ticker symbol, it is a factory producing cash. A rental property isn't real estate, it is a tenant paying your bills. Once you see investments as machines, you stop fidgeting with them. I own businesses I haven't thought about in years because they don't require thinking about. They are well managed, profitable, and durable. My only job is to not sell them. That is passive income in its purest form, wealth accumulating while I do something more interesting with my time. The tragedy of modern investing is that people have confused activity with progress. They think if they are not doing something, they are falling behind. But in investing, doing something is usually what makes you fall behind. The winners are the ones who found something good and stayed put. During the 2008 financial crisis, the world was ending according to the headlines. Banks were failing. And what did we do? We kept holding the same businesses we'd held through previous crises. Because good businesses don't stop being good businesses, just because scared people are selling them. The people who panicked and sold, they locked in losses and missed the recovery. The people who did nothing ended up richer. Not because they were brilliant, but because they understood that temporary pain is the price of permanent gain. Passive income isn't about avoiding all risk. It is about avoiding unnecessary risk. Market volatility isn't risk. If you are holding quality, the real risk is owning garbage and hoping someone will pay you more for it later. That is not investing, that is hot potato with your retirement fund. So here is my final word on passive income. It is not a product you buy, it is a behavior you adopt. You live below your means. You invest the difference in productive assets. You reinvest the returns until the returns replace your income, and then you keep doing nothing while compounding does everything. It won't make you rich next year, but in 30 years you will wake up wondering how you accumulated so much while barely trying. That is the magic of compounding. It works invisibly until suddenly it doesn't. The world will always have new schemes, new gurus, and new promises. Ignore them. Real passive income is boring, patient, and disciplined, and it is the only reliable path to financial independence I've ever seen work. If that disappoints you, good. Your disappointment is my advantage. While you are chasing excitement, I will be sitting here collecting dividends. Time will decide who is right. It always does. Let me address something that most financial advisors won't tell you. The greatest destroyer of wealth isn't market crashes. It is fees. Small, seemingly insignificant fees that compound against you year after year when someone charges you 1% annually to manage your money. They are taking 1% of your entire portfolio every year, whether you make money or not. Over 30 years, that can cost you nearly a third of your final wealth, a third gone. Not to market losses, but to someone who probably can't beat a simple index fund anyway. Most active managers underperform market after fees. You would be better off buying an index fund and spending your time doing literally anything else. But people can't accept this because it threatens their self-image. They want to believe they are sophisticated, but what they are really doing is paying someone else to destroy their compounding. Fire your financial advisor, buy a low-cost index fund, and never look at it again. In 40 years, you will be wealthier than 90% of people who thought they were being smart. The finance industry has convinced people that investing is complicated. It isn't. It is simple. But if people realize that the entire industry would collapse, so they keep selling complexity. I'll tell you another truth. Most people who claim to be living on passive income are lying. Real passive income is rare because real passivity is rare. It requires you to set up a system and then genuinely leave it alone. No checking, no adjusting, no optimizing. I've made most of my money by sitting on my ass and doing absolutely nothing. The less I did, the richer I got. But try telling that to someone who is convinced that wealth requires constant action. They will think you are lazy. Here is what nobody tells you about financial independence. The reason most people never achieve it isn't because they don't earn enough. It is because they spend too much. They keep moving the goalpost. Their lifestyle inflates with their income. The real secret to passive income isn't finding better investments. It is controlling your desires. I've lived below my means my entire life. Not because I'm cheap, though I am, but because I understood that every dollar I didn't spend was a worker I could send out to earn more. Once you see money this way, spending becomes painful because you see what you are giving up. The money I didn't spend became freedom. That is the part about passive income that nobody wants to acknowledge. It is not just about making money work for you. It is about not working against yourself. Every decision to keep up with wealthier neighbors is friction against the machine of compounding. The average person could retire wealthy if they simply drove used cars and invested the difference. But they won't, because they've been sold a lie that happiness comes from consumption. So they work and consume until they die. Never free, never passive. I've been called miserly and cheap. Fine. While they were buying status symbols, I was buying freedom. Now I can do whatever I want with whomever I want. That is the real luxury. Avoiding stupidity is easier than achieving brilliance. People think we got rich because we are smarter. We aren't. We got rich because we avoided being idiots for longer than most people can manage. We didn't buy bubbles and we didn't panic during crashes. We just sat there year after year letting our businesses compound. That is what passive income really means. It means you've removed yourself as the biggest risk factor in your own portfolio. Most people are their own worst enemy. They sabotage themselves with activity and impatience. If I did nothing for the next 5 years, would I be richer or poorer? If the answer is richer, then you figured out what most people never will. The ones who succeeded all understood that less is more, less trading, less complexity, and less interference. The ones who failed were busy trying to be clever. The simplest strategy is to spend less than you earn, invest the difference in quality assets, and then do nothing for as long as you possibly can. Don't trade, don't optimize, don't get clever. Just sit there and let arithmetic compound your discipline into wealth. In 30 years, you will look back and realize that doing nothing was the most profitable thing you ever did. The wealth you built while you were busy living your life will seem miraculous, but it is just math left undisturbed by human stupidity. Boredom compounded over decades beats excitement scattered across years. The market rewards patience and punishes activity. Choose wisely or don't. Either way, time will teach you the lesson. I'd rather you learn it early and profit than learn it late and regret. That is all I have to say. It is simple, it is boring, and it works. Everything else is a distraction designed to separate you from your money. Don't be the sucker, be the patient one. Let everyone else chase excitement while you compound wealth in silence.